Welcome back. This is part 3 of the video lecture series on law in India. So what about the Kani Mata temple? Could that be the place to go on your next trip to India?
In any case, it shows you what kind of things can find room in the immense variety of branches in Hinduism. This variety of teachings, deities, ways of worship is amazing, enchanting, and bewildering. How shall we understand this multitude of very different expressions of Hinduism? Let me quote Eva Rudi Janssen's explanation in her book of Hindu imagery. For a Hindu, truth is unchanging. It is of little importance how it is expressed, and whether the specific form of expression came about a long time ago, or whether it is created today. Every successive cultural development of human thought and feelings was incorporated in religious experience without rejecting the ancient principles and the deities linked with these. The organic growth, which is like a tree constantly producing more branches from the same roots, has turned Hinduism into a religion and a philosophy in which there is room in principle for everyone to have their own place. The diversity of views and influences and the absence of any obvious founder or all-encompassing body of rules have resulted in a view of human diversity which is characteristic of Hinduism as a whole. Recognition of human diversity is one of the basic concepts which still supports the historically developed caste system. The religious and philosophical idea behind this system is that every person has an individual place and task to fulfill in society, which are the result of past lives and a way into the next, possibly better life. What applied to men also applied to the gods. There are many, each with their own place and significance. But this place in the pantheon and the significance of any particular god are constantly changing. When a particular god is the focus of devotion or worship, he or she is always the greatest and the most important. Though Hinduism may appear to be pantheistic, ultimately, everything centers around the one divine truth, the fundamental principle of creation, which, like creation itself, has so many aspects that every facet of that creation, every person and every human principle is reflected in it. The God who is the object of devotion at any particular time is just one of the many different faces which are turned to us and address us. Therefore, it is only the most important for that particular moment. This brings us to the last point on this slide. Even though the various branches of Hinduism are very diverse, practically all of them recognize Brahman as the ultimate reality, and the Vedas, the ancestral sacred text of the Hindu tradition, as the highest source of knowledge. On this picture, you can see a manuscript of a Vedic text. But traditionally, the Vedas are not transmitted in writing. Rather, the priests, the Brahmins, learn them by heart and transmit them orally from generation to generation. The Vedas are composed in an ancient version of Sanskrit, in Vedic Sanskrit. Sanskrit is still in use as a ritual language, and it is at the root of a range of modern Indian languages. It also belongs to the Indo-European family of languages, which means that it is related to our European languages. And this can be seen in many parallels. The word Veda, for example, is related to the Latin verb videre, to see. Thus, it is associated with vision. Furthermore, Veda is also related to the German word Wissen, knowledge. Let me now give you some insight into the traditional Indian worldview that is based on the Vedas and especially on the teachings of Vedanta, that is to say, the end or completion of the Vedas. This worldview that is characteristic of Hinduism is also shared by other religious communities in India and beyond, namely Buddhists, Jains, and Sikhs. According to this worldview, Brahman is the ultimate reality that is both all-encompassing and all-surpassing. Its being all-encompassing means that it contains everything so that nothing can exist outside Brahman. Its being all-surpassing means that it is absolute, limitless, above space and time and everything to the point of being beyond any description. In Indian teachings, this ultimate reality is also referred to as Para-Brahman, the highest Brahman, and as Brahman Nirguna, the Brahman without any attributes or qualities, because to try to describe it and to attribute qualities to it would amount to saying that it is like this and not like this, which would mean to limit it. The oneness of truth and of reality is the starting point of the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, most prominently formulated by 8th century sage Shankara, whose extensive writings became and still remain enormously influential. The oneness of Brahman entails that it is also the source of all being, and from this source the world with all its phenomena emerges due to the effect of Maya, the all-deception. Maya, or Maya Shakti as it is also called, is the cosmic power contained in Brahman, which makes the world appear in its variety and beauty. At the same time, according to the Indian understanding, Maya also works within ourselves. Maya's seductive powers lead us to cling to the changeable phenomena of the world, to take transient creations for real, to surrender to their deception, and to entangle us in the never-ending interplay of illusion, desire, death, and rebirth. What is central to this worldview is the distinction between different levels of reality. At the highest level, Brahman is the unchanging ultimate reality, which stands above space and time. What emerges from Brahman operates on ever lower levels of reality. The more transitory and changeable it is, the more it becomes and fades, as do the phenomena that make up the universe, and as also thus the whole universe. In this view, Brahman alone is absolutely real. The world is not unreal, but it is only real in a limited or relative sense. It is real in so far as it derives its existence from Brahman, and therefore participates in the reality of Brahman. But in so far as the world seems to exist independently, as its phenomena seem to exist separately from Brahman, it is an illusory reality, a play of Maya, a world dream. According to Hindu tradition, the universe produced by Maya includes three cosmic forces that are embodied by the three gods Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma, the creator god, stands for the creative force that brings everything into existence. The creator god Brahma is not to be confused with Brahman, the ultimate reality. On the picture bottom right, you can see Brahma emerging from a lotus flower at the beginning of the creation of the universe. And he is represented with four faces looking into the four directions of space. Vishnu, the preserver, is the protective force that makes sure that the beings of the world have some relative durability. Hindu mythology tells colorful stories of a series of incarnations or appearances of Vishnu, the so-called Vishnu avatars, through which Vishnu periodically comes into the world in order to save it from some great danger. The third cosmic force, which is embodied by Shiva, is destruction and renewal, the force that makes sure that what has come into existence disappears after some time and makes room for new creations. Destruction isn't seen in a negative way here. It's seen as a condition for renewal. Shiva is what keeps the cosmos moving. In Hindu mythology, this is expressed in Shiva's cosmic dance, which is what you can see bottom right on the slide. According to the classical Indian teachings, universes evolve in huge cycles. The duration of a whole universe is referred to as a day of Brahma or a kalpa, at the end of which the universe disappears, with everything flashing back into Brahman, the source of all being, where it originally came from. A day of Brahma is followed by a night of Brahma, and such a night of Brahma is a period of equal length during which there is no universe, nothing. Everything is hidden, so to speak, in Brahman as a potential only, without being manifested, without materializing in the form of creations. But then comes a next day of Brahma, triggering the creation of a new universe. That in turn is followed by a next night of Brahma, then another day of Brahma, another night of Brahma, another day of Brahma, another night of Brahma, and so on, in an endless series of days and nights of Brahma. Let's look at one single day of Brahma, the duration of one single universe. And here again, such a day of Brahma is divided into a series of smaller cycles, the so-called Manvantaras and Mahayugas. Let me show you this on the blackboard. Indian texts say that a kalpa, that corresponds to a day of Brahma, consists of 14 Manvantaras, each of which contains around 71.5 Mahayugas, adding up to 1,000 Mahayugas for one kalpa. However, it's not about the precise numbers. The numbers can vary in different texts. What is important is the basic message, and the basic message of the Indian theory of cycles is that time is cyclical in character, and that the developments that mark the course of the world are repeated again and again in similar ways. Let's have a closer look at a Mahayuga. The term Mahayuga means big age, and such a big age is divided into 4 yugas, 4 ages. The element Maha, with the meaning big or great, occurs also in other words. For example, in Gandhi's honorific title Mahatma, the Great Soul. It also illustrates the close connection of Sanskrit with our European languages. Maha is the same word as the ancient Greek word mega that is still in rather frequent use in our everyday language today. The first yuga of the Mahayuga is called Krita Yuga. It's a golden age when the world is in almost perfect shape. In this age, the world is sustained by all 4 quarters of Dharma, the world order, and people are naturally thinking and acting in exemplary ways. But over time, the world is aging, the world order is somewhat weakening, which brings the world into the next age, the Treta Yuga. In this second age, the world is already in a less ideal state, but it still rests upon 3/4 of Dharma, the world order, which is why the name of this age, Treta Yuga, is associated with the number 3. The word Treta is related to Latin tres, French trois, German drei, and English 3. The following age is the Dwapara Yuga, when only 2/4 of Dharma are left, which brings the world in an unstable situation. Dvapara contains the number 2, corresponding to Russian and Polish dva, Latin duo, Italian due, and French deux. The state of the world becomes even more precarious in the last phase of the cycle, the Kali Yuga or Dark Age, when only 1/4 of the Dharma remains to sustain the world. Kali also has the meaning of strife, quarrel, discord, division, and war. The people of the Kali Yuga are deluded, ignoring Dharma and following their passions. Selfishness and ruthlessness dominate. This is, in Indian terms, the age in which we live, and this already for some time, for some millennia or so. As you can see on the blackboard, the 4 yugas are not equal in length. The Kali Yuga is the shortest one. The Dwapara Yuga is twice the Kali Yuga. The Treta Yuga is 3 times the length of the Kali Yuga. And the Krita Yuga 4 times the Kali Yuga. And as you can easily see, all of this adds up to quite impressive amounts of time. When the cycle ends, a new Mahayuga begins with a new Krita Yuga, and the whole process starts fresh down the road of the 4 yugas. Let me add a comment on the number 4 at this point. In India, the number 4 is associated with the idea of completeness. This is why for a complete Mahayuga, it takes 4 yugas. This is why for maintaining the world completely intact, it takes all 4 quarters of Dharma. And this is why for creating a complete world, it takes a creator god with 4 faces looking in the 4 directions of space. When we look at a single Mahayuga and at how the world evolves within such a Mahayuga, what we can see is a downwards tendency. It's a world that, from its perfect original state, goes towards decline, towards decay, until there is a restoration with the beginning of a new cycle. This is very different from modern assumptions about how humankind evolves. In the modern West and among westernized people throughout the world, we tend to assume that, starting from primitive origins, humankind set out to climb higher and higher levels of civilization. Perhaps there are some setbacks from time to time, but the overall tendency is assumed to be a constant movement in the direction of progress. However, in a classical Indian perspective, this assumption of an ever-improving world in which the best is still to come must seem rather naive. What we have looked at is just one out of many Mahayugas that form a kalpa. Indian texts mention the number of 1,000 to indicate the immensity of those cycles. And this is just for one kalpa, or day of Brahma. And such a kalpa is just one day of Brahma in an endless series of days and nights of Brahma that follow each other. What is more is that, according to Indian teachings, there is not only one type of universe organized along the dimensions of space and time, but there are also countless other universes organized along different dimensions that are beyond our imagination. As you can see, it's truly mind-boggling. Let me quote what the well-known Indologist Heinrich Zimmer remarks in that context. This vast time consciousness, transcending the brief span of the individual, even the racial biography, is the time consciousness of nature herself. Nature knows not centuries, but ages, geological, astronomical ages. World ages are her shortest span for the various species that she puts forth and permits finally to die. like the dinosaurs, the mammoths, the giant birds. India, as life brooding on itself, thinks of the problem of time in periods comparable to those of our astronomy, geology, and paleontology. That is to say, in biological terms, terms of the species, not of the ephemeral ego. We of the West, on the other hand, regard world history as a biography of mankind, and in particular of Occidental man, whom we estimate to be the most consequential member of the family. Biography is that form of seeing and representing which concentrates on the unique, the induplicable in any portion of existence, and then brings out the sense and direction giving traits. We think of egos, individuals, lives, not of life with a capital L. But what about human beings? What is their destiny in this multitude of countless universes, all of which evolve in an endless series of cycles? Just as universes go through countless cycles in their becoming and passing, and as the end of one cycle is followed by the beginning of a new one, so according to the Indian understanding, the soul is also in an endless spiral of death and rebirth. The soul passes through countless existences at different levels of being in countless different worlds. Existences that correspond to those of humans, or those of animals, plants, or even minerals. This transmigration of souls, this endless circuit in which souls are trapped, is what Indians call samsara. And you have seen a much simplified, rather crude version of this in the rat temple. In the manifold gradation of different existences, human existence appears as a particularly central form of existence because it offers the widest possibilities of action, and especially also the possibility of freeing oneself from samsara, of breaking out of the cycle of rebirth. For this reason, it is considered a huge privilege to have been born as a human being. Which body the soul obtains when it is reborn is determined by the inner imprints the soul has received due to its actions in former existences. From an Indian point of view, actions do not only have external effects, they also shape the inner being of the actor, his or her soul, jiva by the Sanskrit term. The positive and negative imprints that good and bad actions leave in the soul are what Indians call good and bad karma. In its basic meaning, the Sanskrit term karma simply means action, but it also extends to the effects of actions on the soul. And this is where the law of karma kicks in. The law of karma means that every action has an effect on the further fate of the soul, be it in the present life or in future lives. Based on the good and bad karma accumulated during a lifetime, the soul is judged after death, and depending on the outcome, it reaches a higher or lower form of existence at its rebirth. In the light of this law of karma, everything we are and everything that happens to us is the precise consequence of the karma we have accumulated through our actions in our present life and in past lives. The law of karma is based on an understanding of humans as acting beings. Humans always act in some way. They cannot do without acting. The Bhagavad Gita, one of the central sacred texts of Hinduism, puts it that way. No one can remain, even for a moment, without performing some action. Everyone is made to act. Perform thy allotted work, for action is superior to inaction. Even the maintenance of thy body cannot be accomplished without action. But this is not all. There is more to human beings. Similar to what we have seen for the reality of the world, There are, in the Indian view, also different levels of the reality of human beings. Not all elements of a human being are at the same level of reality. Because of its temporary nature, the reality of the human body seems most relative. Therefore, the body is considered being on a rather low level of reality. In contrast, the soul appears to be on a higher level of reality, as it is able to live through countless existences in the samsara. However, what is real in the highest and ultimately only sense is what Indians call Atman, the innermost essence, the core of a human being. The Vedanta teaches that in their innermost essence, in their Atman, human beings are essentially identical with Brahman, the unchanging ultimate reality. But as long as the human soul is entangled in samsara, Atman remains wrapped up in the wheels of all deception, of Maya, which makes the soul believe that she and the world around her have a reality independent of Brahman, leading her to identify with her attachments and desires that conceal Atman as her true identity. Overcoming this delusion, finding the way back to one's innermost self, Atman, and entering the ultimate reality, Brahman, is considered both the most difficult and most desirable goal of a human life. Attaining this goal means freeing oneself from the entanglement in samsara.
This overview of the cosmological and anthropological foundations gives us the means for understanding classical Indian legal thinking and social philosophy, as well as the key concept of Dharma, which is what we will be addressing now. So what exactly is Dharma? What does it mean?
The word Dharma is derived from the Sanskrit verb dhri, meaning to hold, to maintain, to bear, and it is related to the Latin verb ferro, to bear, and the Latin adjective firmus, strong, firm, lasting. In its basic meaning, the word Dharma means that which bears and sustains, or that which is strong and enduring. Dharma is a comprehensive, very broad concept. In its broadest sense, Dharma refers to the world order. It means the eternal laws that sustain the universe and give it stability. On the level of human beings, Dharma regulates every aspect of life, from family life to work and religious practices, including dietary rules, the rules about what food is allowed and what is not. This shows you that the term Dharma is much broader than the term law as we use it in the West today. Dharma encompasses not only specifically legal, but also ethical and religious rules of conduct, and moreover extends far beyond the human level by including the entire world order, which makes it clear that in an Indian perspective, humans and their actions are placed in a cosmic context and that they participate in the responsibility for maintaining the cosmos. Dharma is also closely related to the law of karma. It is the yardstick for measuring the value and non-value of actions. Actions can be Dharma or adharma, corresponding to Dharma or not. But this yardstick is not the same for everybody. There are different yardsticks for different people. Everyone has his or her own Dharma, which is referred to as Swadharma, one's own Dharma. From an Indian perspective, the world and human society can only function if each being assumes the role assigned to it in the overall framework. Therefore, each person has his or her own tasks and duties, and the same action may be Dharma conforming for one person, while it is contrary to Dharma, adharma for another. The specific Dharma, the Svadharma, is determined on the one hand by caste affiliation and on the other hand by the phase of life. We must therefore place Dharma in the context of the different phases that make up a lifetime and the different castes that make up society. And this context also includes the different aims of life, which are the points of reference. Let's begin with Purushartha, the aims that can and should be pursued in life. According to Indian teachings, those aims or areas of life are at the number of 4. Each of these 4 areas of life goes with a corresponding set of knowledge that is the object of an extensive classical Sanskrit literature. The first area, artha, is that of material possessions, prosperity and success in society. From a Hindu point of view, the pursuit of wealth and power is a legitimate aim in life. The classical works in this area of life, the Arthashastras, are political manuals aimed at kings and government officials as well as at private individuals. Using animal fables, they describe in detail and sometimes with cynical realism all the techniques and methods that serve to prevail against others, to be successful in political intrigue, and to advance in the struggle for power and wealth. The second goal in life, Kama, is focused on love, lust, and pleasure. In Indian mythology, Kama is the god of love, who, like the Greek and Roman god of love, embodies the desire for love, which he sends into the hearts with his flower arrows. The main work of classical Indian Kama literature is the Kama Sutra of Vatsyayana, the famous manual of the Indian art of love. The third area of life is Dharma. As you can see, the term Dharma comes up again in the context of the aims of life as well. Here it has the meaning of striving to fulfill one's duties, to live up to Svadharma. All is here about acquiring good karma with regard to the fate of the soul after death. The classical works in this field, Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras, contain precise and detailed descriptions of caste-specific ritual and social obligations, which are the more extensive and demanding the higher the caste. Artha, Kama and Dharma together form the group of 3, Trivaka, within which Dharma takes precedence insofar as Artha and Kama are to be pursued in a Dharma-appropriate manner. The last and highest of the 4 aims of life is moksha, liberation. While Artha, Kama and Dharma are aspirations within the world, moksha aims to free oneself from attachments to the world, to overcome illusion, the world dream, and to free oneself from entanglement in samsara. Whoever has reached moksha has become free from all desire for the illusionary realities that, due to the effect of Maya, make up the world and one's own ego. Moksha means leaving behind all worldly aspirations for prosperity, artha, for lust, kama, and also for fulfillment of duty, dharma. It means to find one's way back to one's innermost self, Atman, that is identical with Brahman, the ultimate reality, which is described as a state of pure being, Sat, pure knowledge, Chit, and pure bliss, Ananda. This most desirable but difficult to achieve goal is the main theme of Indian quest for wisdom, to which much of classical Indian literature is devoted. Next, we have to take a look at life as it evolves over time. From a Hindu point of view, an ideal course of life is divided into 4 phases or stages of life, the so-called ashrama. Depending on the stage of life, different aims of life are at the forefront. The first phase is Antevazin or Brahmacharya, the stage of the pupil, of the student. In this stage, all is about acquiring knowledge under the guidance of a teacher, a guru, And it's about knowledge on all four aims of life: Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha. Students are expected to be devoted to their guru and to concentrate entirely on gaining knowledge. Marriage marks the beginning of the next stage of life, that of the householder, grihastha. This is the phase of family life as well as of professional life. And it is in this phase that people assume their responsibilities associated with their caste. In terms of the aims of life, the focus here is on the group of three, the pursuit of Artha, Kama, and Dharma. But when the children are grown up and have become independent, the time comes when the parents can withdraw from social life and can move into the third stage of life, the departure for the forest, vanaprastha. In this phase, husband and wife leave the community of the village and retreat into the solitude of the forest. Their worldly life focusing on Artha, Kama, and Dharma is completed. And the last goal of life, moksha, comes to the fore. Having fulfilled their family obligations and played their roles in society, they now disengage from the outside world and set out on the path to their innermost self, Atman. This third stage, however, serves only to prepare for the fourth and last stage of life, that of the wandering beggar, bhiksu or sadhu, or homeless pilgrim, sannyasi. In this phase, one gives up one's last home in the solitude of the forest to wander around and visit holy places, living on what people give, without being bound to a particular place, without owning anything, and without worrying about future. Existence is entirely centered on moksha. At this stage, caste affiliation becomes irrelevant. In the Indian perception, the sannyasi is above caste. In practice, of course, not everyone lives through all four phases. Especially the third and fourth stages are not practiced by everyone. But the basic pattern remains relevant as an ideal, as a frame of reference. The four phases stand for the ideal course of a life. So we have four aims and four stages. The number 4 is associated with the idea of completeness. For a complete life, it takes 4 aims and 4 stages. Just as a complete life focuses on 4 aims and evolves through 4 phases, a complete society is based on 4 main castes, 4 varnas, according to Indian teachings. The first main caste is formed by the Brahmins, the priests and scholars. The second main caste are the Kshatriyas, the warriors, the princes and kings. The third main caste is that of the merchants and large-scale farmers. And the fourth main caste are the Shudras, that comprise professional groups with a serving function, such as farmers, manual workers, craftsmen and artists, musicians, for example. People who are outside the 4 main castes are considered casteless. These include foreigners, the culturally very different tribal population living in remote villages of their own, the indigenous people of India, and people with professions that bring them into contact with particularly impure things, such as dead animal or human bodies, animal skins or excrements. They are referred to as outcasts, Dalit, Pariah, or untouchables. The 4 main castes and also the outcasts are further divided into subcastes or groups of birth, so-called jatis. These are particularly numerous among the Shudras, who make up the majority of the population. In the reality of social life, the jatis are the most important point of reference for the identity of different communities. Traditionally, people live within their jatis. This is where they have most of their social interactions and where they also find their marriage partners. Altogether, there are thousands of jatis among the Indian population. This makes for a highly differentiated society. People live in very different and clearly separated social groups. And each of these groups has its own traditions, its own areas of responsibility, and its own Dharma. As mentioned, caste affiliation is most relevant in the second phase of life, when people engage in exercising their professions and fulfilling their functions within society. Caste is also important in the first stage of life, to the extent that in preparation for adult life, all the caste-specific professional knowledge has to be acquired. On the other hand, caste becomes increasingly irrelevant for people who are in the last phases of life. You would not ask sannyasis about their caste. They are considered above caste. Let me sum up the different basic functions that are traditionally assigned to the different main castes. Brahmins serve society by performing rites and transmitting and applying knowledge, including medical knowledge. Traditionally, every family employs its Brahmin for ceremonies that are to be conducted, for taking care of the health of the members of the family, and for the education of the children. In addition, Brahmins are responsible for preserving knowledge by learning sacred texts by heart and handing them down from generation to generation through oral transmission. The kshatriyas, the warriors that include princes and kings, serve society by offering protection, security, and order. The vaishyas, the merchants and large-scale farmers, are responsible for the material well-being of society. They serve society by supplying material goods and creating wealth. The Shudras, who form the majority of the population and split up in a multitude of different professional groups, serve society by contributing physical labor, craftsmanship, and artistic creation. Outcasts take over tasks that are considered impure because they involve contact with dead human or animal bodies or with excrements. Those tasks include, for example, the cremation of corpses, the production of leather goods, sanitation, fishing, slaughtering of animals, and processing meat. What do you think about the whole system? That system with Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, outcasts, and thousands of different jatis? Looking at it from a European perspective, it seems rather strange at first glance, doesn't it? But when we take a look at other Indo-European societies, we can find a number of parallels. Let's take, for example, medieval and early modern European society or Celtic society. When we look at those, we can find a number of parallels. For example, the Brahmins correspond to the clerics in the Middle Ages or the Druids among the Celts. The Kshatriyas correspond to noblemen in the Middle Ages or the warriors in Celtic society. The Vaishyas, Shudra, and outcasts can be assimilated to the commoners in the Middle Ages or to the people in Celtic society. We can even find parallels for the Vaishyas in the patricians in medieval cities, the rich citizens. And the parallel for outcasts could be seen in the servants in medieval society. As far as jatis are concerned, they present similarities to the guilds of craftsmen in medieval cities. So on second thought, maybe the whole thing is a bit less strange than it first appeared. But what are the underlying ideas of the caste system, and what does it mean today? Indian mythology tells the story of the emergence of the Varnas from Purusha, the giant primordial man. In this story, the Brahmins emerged from Purusha's mouth, the Kshatriyas from his arms, the Vaishyas from his thighs, and the Shudras from his feet. The story points to the functions of the main castes. The Brahmins are the mouth of society through which knowledge is transmitted and handed down from generation to generation. The Kshatriyas are the arms that protect society. The Vaishyas give society strength, and the Shudras support the whole society. The Varnas are thus seen as all being part of the same organism of society, and each of them is needed for the functioning of society. On the other hand, the myth of the origin of the Varnas indicates also a hierarchy of castes. And what is significant in that context is that the highest rank is not about power and not about money, but about knowledge. Hierarchy does not mean that a higher rank would necessarily correspond to a better or more comfortable life. Each caste goes with its privileges and with its duties, its burden. And the higher the rank, the more extensive and demanding the caste-specific rules to be observed in life. Life is especially complicated for Brahmins, and there is little envy among lower castes for the complicated rules of life to be followed by Brahmins. There is also no direct correlation between caste affiliation and personal wealth. People of higher caste are not necessarily richer than people of lower caste. Brahmins, for example, are expected to concentrate on acquiring knowledge. According to their caste-specific rules, they should not own more than what they need to sustain their families. India is a land of diversity. The emphasis is on the differences in the nature, predispositions, and talents of different people. On the other hand, a complex society requires a system of division of labor. And from an Indian point of view, every task in society is best performed by people with the task-specific talents and skills. Yet nature, predispositions and talents are frequently inherited. Not always, of course, but often. In this logic, Indians have based their division of labor on a system of hereditary jatis to which professions are exclusively assigned. Profession is determined by birth. The members of every caste have to stick with their own profession. They are not allowed to engage in professional activities assigned to other castes. This protects every caste from cross-caste competition. Jati is also a matter of identity. Every profession comes with its specific professional tradition, ethics, and pride, especially when continued for generations within the same families. This is why people are usually proud of their jati, that is part of their identity. It's not about changing one's profession, it's about identifying with one's own profession and striving to exercise it to perfection. The system aims to preserve group identity by maintaining the specific nature of each community, which requires to keep the jatis as pure as possible by avoiding any mixing of castes. This is behind the rules that prevent intermarriage. People are expected to marry within their own jati. This is also what is behind the rules restricting commensality, sharing meals with people from other castes. And this is also what explains bans on touching. Especially Brahmins avoid to touch people from other castes. All of this is about avoiding contamination with alien identities and preventing the blurring of differences. Another aspect is that jati defines Swadharma, one's own dharma. And this is related to the law of karma, because Swadharma is the yardstick for measuring the value and non-value of actions, all of which influences, in the Indian view, on the future fate of the soul. Yet Swadharma is also important with regard to the well-being of society. The common good is best advanced when everyone lives up to Swadharma in a spirit of serving society. But today, that spirit has largely been lost. The caste system is in a deep crisis. The beginnings of decline go back a long way. The caste system has been criticized for long. It seems that, while originally less rigid, it has become more sophisticated and impermeable over time. This ossification has further increased under British colonial rule. The detailed registration of caste affiliations led to a fixation of the system. Furthermore, the British started to recruit more and more high caste Indians, especially Brahmins, for their colonial administration, which led part of the Indian elites to adopt British lifestyles and to neglect or discard their traditional functions in society, thus undermining the system. Industrialization and urbanization and the emergence of a modern economy following independence have brought further this connection between caste affiliation and professional activities. Modern jobs do not fit into the ancient caste society. In addition, caste has been increasingly politicized, for example through well-intentioned policies aimed at fostering backward classes and scheduled castes. The result is a profound shift in the meaning of caste. The spirit of service has largely been lost. Instead, the focus has shifted towards elevating one's status, claiming privileges, and looking down on others. Caste affiliation is no longer about a set of professional tasks to be performed for the well-being of society as a whole. Caste affiliation today is more of a question of social status, claims for privileges, and pursuit of caste-specific political interests. As you can see on the blackboard, the decline we can observe here is quite dramatic. On the other hand, this probably fits rather well into the cyclical Indian time consciousness.